Gas Network presents Sports for the Culture.
I'm here with the family.
Bryce, XXV, Double I,
Rome,
D-Malo, Gruff Lion,
T-Buggy, man.
to the greatest sports show on the planet, La Familia. Hope y'all ready for a ride.
Can't wait to hear what you guys got to say. Let's get it. Let's get it. We back with an episode of Hail to the Culture. It is I, your boy at Bryce XXV Double I, aka Mr. Big Leaguer. And as always on this show, I'm joined by my guy. Introduce yourself, brother.
you know who it is, your boy Young Rome 22 on all socials as always, man. Very excited to be here talking Commanders off season. A lot of nice moves to talk about. We're coming off the best season that me or Bryce have probably experienced in our 30 plus years of life. So let's get into it, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. This episode today is mostly going to be centered around the big question within the Commanders world right now, which is, are the Commanders all in for a Super Bowl right now? And me and Rome will break that down. But before we get to that, let's just talk about some of these signings that have happened recently: free agency, trades, things of that concern. So let's start with Debo, man. And let's give a little grade for the Debo trade and kind of what your expectations are now that Debo's in the fold.
Honestly, the Debo Samuel trade. So it's funny because if anybody who's watched us on Sports for the Culture, the podcast with everybody else, you probably heard us, speak a little ill of Debo. Maybe not crazy ill, but I haven't always been the biggest Debo supporter, right? I've always said that Terry was a much better receiver. He could actually run routes and stuff. But don't get that confused for actual hate on Debo. Debo, to me, isn't just a wide receiver. He's a playmaker. And what that means is you can plug him almost anywhere and he'll find a way to make plays. So I think his value in an offense with Cliff Kingsbury is higher than if you were just going to use him as a straight wide receiver. So adding that into the factor of my grade, I think it's a B+. Originally, I kind of was leaning towards a C, but when you really stop and think about what Cliff can do with a receiver the style of Debo or a player the style of Debo, I think it adds even more value than just putting him out there as your number 2 receiver. So I'm gonna give that trade a B+.
Yeah, I think I agree with that grade, man. I'm gonna go with B+ as well. I thought the compensation was right where you want it for a guy of that caliber. I didn't feel like we had to give up the farm to grab Debo. And I also feel like, there are some drawbacks, right? We're talking about a guy that's only on a 1-year deal. So you did give up a draft pick for a single season of Debo Samuel, which makes me wonder if they have plans of extending him early. But you're talking about $17 million in the books for 1 season, and a guy who kind of has ability that, in my opinion, the Commanders have been missing. Yards after the catch from that outside or inside receiver position is something that was hard to come by unless your name was Terry McLaurin. Add another guy that can do that, I think, will be very, very helpful. You pair that with a guy like Austin Eckler who can get you some yak out of the backfield, Terry who can get it from the outside, and you add a chess piece like Debo to that equation, could be trouble for opposing defenses. So I do like the move. I always hate trading draft picks for rentals. So, yeah. And part of me feels like this could be a rental, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little later when we talk about if the Commanders are in win now mode. Moving on to some of the free agent signings. The first big free agent signing, and I mean, depending on how you look at it, you might not feel like it's a big free agent signing at all. A lot of people were upset about it, about the guaranteed money. I'm talking about the guaranteed money that the Commanders gave Javon Kinlaw. Big deal, bro. It was a big deal. I think it was he got about $30 million guaranteed out of the Commanders. What was your thoughts about the Kinlaw deal, and are you worried like some of the Commanders nation?
I was a little surprised by the Kinlaw deal. I still got a lot of faith in Adam Peters as the GM, but not re-signing John Allen and then signing Kinlaw for the guarantee that you signed him for, just it raised some question marks to me because we both know John Allen. Maybe wasn't the best mix anymore. Maybe he needed to go now after all this time, but he was still a high-level football player. I would probably rank him higher than Kinlaw at the same spot. So to let him go and then to sign Kinlaw, it doesn't make too much sense to me. But then when you start thinking long-term, I believe Deron Payne's only got 1 more year left on his contract. Maybe signing Kinlaw now is setting you up to move on from Payne as well next offseason, and to keep Newton and Kinlaw as your two main tackles for a few years. That might have been the thought process with that. Outside of that, I wasn't too sure on why Kinlaw needed such a large guarantee. I don't think he's a bad player, but I would still put him below Allen and Payne in that regard at defensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 3 years, 45 million. When those figures came out, I understood why Commanders Nation wasn't all that happy with it. But I see it a couple different ways. One, I feel like you don't pay Kinlaw 3 years, 45 with 30 million guaranteed just to be a rotational tackle, right?
Right.
As we saw last season, like the Commanders, their plan is to have a solid rotation at that defensive tackle spot. Guys moving in and out. Last year, we saw guys like Sheldon Day heavily contribute. Jalen Holmes, heavy contributor. Obviously, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and of course, Johnny Newton. So that's 5 guys right there that were consistent rotation guys. I don't think you paid 3 years, 45 to Kinlaw for him just to fit into that rotation. So then the question becomes like, what do they actually see Kinlaw as? And, last 5-10 years, I've been heavy on the NFL draft, doing my own big boards, what have you. I had Kinlaw ranked really high coming out of SC. And that was because I saw a guy that wasn't just a space eater. This is a guy that, to me, had significant explosion coming out of the draft. So the question is, do they see him as a tackle, or are they seeing him more in that defensive end spot? I remember back in the day when Dan Quinn had those dominant defenses over in Seattle. He had that end spot. I think he called it like maybe like a Buffalo D end or something like that. But basically, you get a big man on that D end that can rush the passer. Back in the day for Dan Quinn, it was a guy like Red Bryant, right? Somebody who's big as hell but can come off the end and cause disruption. If they see Kinlaw being that, I get it, right? Also, when we look at Kinlaw in comparison to Jonathan Allen, which a lot of fans have done, we're shaving some years off of the player, right? Kinlaw is about 3 years younger than Allen. He's going to be 27 when the season starts, right? So with that in mind, they're trying to, and it's in line with what they did last year in free agency, in my opinion, right? They're trying to find players who are ascending, right? Who they feel like are getting better year after year. And once they get in our system, will just get even better, right? You think of a guy like Frankie Louvu, and I'm not comparing the production that Kinlaw's had recently to Louvu before he got to the Commanders, but think about the Louvu signing and what he kind of became. Another one that they tried to do that with was like Allegretti, right? They brought in Allegretti, who was never like really a big time contributor on the Chiefs, right? But when he got into the Commanders, he was expected to start because they saw a player who was ascending in the role that he was playing in the Chiefs. And maybe that's the same thing they see with Kinlaw. So I'll be really interested to see where Kinlaw opens that season. Keep in mind, we don't have a lot of edge rushers right now. And last season, our biggest issue wasn't just rushing the passer from the edge, but it was really containing the run and setting an edge. And when you talk about Kinlaw, a guy that's 6'5", 315 with some explosion, maybe they're looking for him to be that edge setter.
Yeah, they've had an issue setting the edge for a few years now, dating back to Chase Young. So we definitely need to get somebody to solidify the ends on the D line.
Yeah, agreed. Let's go to the next big. I wouldn't call it a big signing, but the next signing. They nabbed Will Harris from the Saints. What are your expectations for Will Harris, and what did you think about that signing?
I like that signing. I think it's an upgrade from what we had at safety the last year. I think Will Harris is a very solid safety. Doesn't get beat often. He to me, he's kind of the definition of a safety, right? You want a guy back there that you can rely on to not give up big plays, and that kind of defines Will Harris. I like the moves that they're making in the secondary. I think the secondary is coming together. That was the defense overachieved last season. So shout out to Joe Witt Jr. And I think the upgrades that they're making, even if I'm a little shaky on the Kinlaw money, I think that still is an improvement, as well as this Will Harris signing. So hopefully with a little bit more talent on the defensive side, they can get a little bit more production as well.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I think the secondary has been addressed in a good way. I do think the D line may have taken a bit of a step back. We'll see, and we'll see who else they bring in. But Will Harris was probably my favorite move, especially when it comes to free agent signings. I really, really like Will Harris. And, we had Jeremy Chin last year who outperformed what I think were most people's expectations. I mean, he went over 100 tackles. Had some big time plays, big time pick in the Lions game, right, in the playoffs, and just was all. It felt like he was all over the field. One thing I will say about Jeremy Chin, it seemed like he could make splash plays, but some of the routine plays he would miss, in my opinion. Like I think back to the Saquon Barkley 60-yard touchdown to open the playoff game, and obviously people pointed Dante Fowler Jr. for missing his contain on that play or failing to set the edge. But in my opinion, Jeremy Chin had the cleanest look at a tackle on that play and completely whiffed. I think when we talk about a guy like Will Harris, I think that's a guy that plays that Joe Witt style of football, man. Like Will Harris is coming in 100 miles an hour for tackles. He's breaking down and he's getting hits on guys, man. So I haven't seen too many whiffs from Will Harris when I went back and watched some of this film. I was impressed with him his last year with the Saints. I was impressed with him when he was with the Lions. I think this is going to be a great pickup for this defense. I wouldn't be surprised if Lance Newmark, assistant GM to Adam Peters, really was the one that vouched for this guy, considering he had him in Detroit. Really like the Will Harris signing. I think that's, in my opinion, we're going to look back and say that's an A+ signing. I think it's going to go down as one of those, like a similar sign to like a Luvu, right? When it's all said and done. I think we're going to look back at Will Harris and say, how did we steal him for this price?
That's a real good comparison because I feel like, unless you're like deep in the trenches watching tape, looking at free agency, you might not have realized how good Luvu was when we signed him last year. Will Harris is very, very similar to that. Another good point you made, plays the style of Joe Witt Jr. defense that Joe Witt is looking for. So I think Will Harris is gonna be hand to glove fit to this defense, and I think he's gonna make a ton of plays. Big upgrade.
Yeah, one more thing I'd like people to think about when you look at like some of our free agent signings, right, is this was the year, another year for Commanders of 1 year deal after 1 year deal, right? Most of the signings we're making are just for a year. And Will Harris is the only player outside of Kinlaw, not including our re-signs, but I'm talking about like, pure free agents outside of Kinlaw, right? He's the only one that got a multi-year deal. Now, albeit it's only 2 seasons, but, when we're looking at a team that's only offering 1 year deals and you see a guy get 2, that's typically a guy they think they can stick with and they've got some plans for. So like that signing a lot. Next one I want to talk about, and we'll move on from free agent signings after this, is Jonathan Jones, man. I know you're big on the cornerback play, Rome, so I know you were dialed into this move. What are your thoughts of bringing Jonathan Jones in?
This, in my opinion, is a huge upgrade. One of the biggest upgrades. We mentioned it already. The defensive line they're still trying to work out, but the secondary, it feels like they've definitely took the time to upgrade immediately. No disrespect to Benjamin St-Juste because his time here is over. Hopefully, he out West Coast can get his career together. But I am beyond happy to see him out of the burgundy and gold. We could have signed almost anybody and it would have been an upgrade. But getting Jonathan Jones is huge. That is a legitimate number 2 corner that allows Sanderstill to go back into the slot, which was the original plan for him. So I think Sanderstill will continue to grow and stand out. And I think that gives Lattimore, you can truly get him healthy, put him as your number 1 corner. You got Jones on the other side, who can definitely match up with the majority of wide receiver 2s in the league. So from a cornerback perspective, I think, we went from a D to a B+, potential A. And with Will Harris as safety, I think that entire secondary could end up being one of the better secondaries in the league. I know it's early, but once we get to August and we start seeing stuff put together, if they can solidify this pass rush as well, I think that Commander secondary could truly be dangerous.
Okay. One of the better secondaries in the league. Got some high hopes. I like the Jonathan Jones signing for a couple of reasons. One, I think although he's a smaller corner, I think he can run with anybody, right? He's shown that elite speed, and even at age 30, 31, he's shown he can still run with the best of them. Another thing that's impressive to me about Jonathan Jones is his ability to cover crossing routes. I feel like over the last season with Joe Witt Jr., our Achilles heel, outside of obviously getting ran on game after game, was defending crossing routes, man. And Noah I eventually did come in and lock that slot position down. But I would love to see Jonathan Jones in the slot for us. I feel like Mikey Sanderstill, in my opinion, showed so much at that outside corner that I would just want to keep him there. And if we can find a slot better than Noah I, or, a slot that can come in and play when we go to those dime packages. If we got to put two players into those two corners into those slots, and we got Noah I and Jonathan Jones, I would love that. So I would like to see Jonathan Jones there, but that's not my biggest reason for being a fan of this move. My biggest reason for being a fan of this move is Jonathan Jones comes from the New England Patriots organization. And he's not just a recent New England Patriot, right? He's been with the Patriots his entire 10-year career, right? Meaning he's got 2 Super Bowls under his belt. He knows what it looks like to win, and he knows what a certain standard should be day in and day out of a facility. And I think that's the thing I'm most hyped about when it comes to Jonathan Jones. And I can say the same thing about Dietrich Wise, who's another guy who's going under the radar a bit as a free agent signing, but I think will help that D-line a lot, just from that standpoint of knowing what it's supposed to look like to be a winning organization. And I think that's the biggest thing that Jonathan Jones will bring to us. And I'm excited to have him help continue to bring along a guy like Mikey Sanders still. Wouldn't be surprised if we draft another young corner. You got a guy like that can show them the way. That's a major addition in my opinion. So I think that's a pretty big move from the Commanders brass.
Yeah, I agree with that. Bringing in a vet like Jones, the veteran experience is definitely huge, especially when you're bringing along Sanders still. I do think they draft another guy, and you mentioned Noah I think that re-signing is part of why I also think the secondary as a whole could be one of the tops, because you just made this point. Even if you go to a dime look, Noah I proved that he can play slot in the NFL last season. So if you're telling me he's only got to guard the third or fourth guy consistently, across the board, I really like the Commanders' chances. Joe Witt Jr. seems like he wants to play a lot of man coverage. With Lattimore, Jonathan Jones, Sanders Still, and Noah I at your corner, you have the freedom to do that.
No, that's a fact, man. Jonathan Jones has proven that he can play man. So yeah, I like the move. I like the move a lot. All right, let's keep it pushing, man, and let's go to the biggest move. I think we both agree the biggest move of this free agency off season so far, and that's the deal for Laramie Tunsil, man. Now, obviously, the Skins play. I wouldn't call it a premium, but they paid a decent amount to get Tunsil. I mean, you're talking about trading a second-round pick next year, right? Along with, I believe, a third-round pick next year, and then giving them our fourth this. No, we get back a fourth, so we gave them a fourth, a second. I mean, it's a big haul, man. It's a big haul. I'm gonna get the exact details on the trade here. But so we get Larry Tunsil and a 4th-round pick this year. We had to trade a 2025 3rd-round pick, 2025 7th-round pick, a 2026 2nd-round pick, and a 2026 4th-round pick. So decent size package being sent over to the Texans. But I mean, you're talking about a guy, Larry Tunsil, who comes in ready to protect Jaden Daniels' blind side. What are your expectations for Tunsil, and what is your instant grade on that deal?
I'll give this grade an A. My expectations for Tunsil are very high, but the reason I give the grade an A, and we talked about this a lot on this show when we originally let Trent Williams walk all those years back, there was never a true replacement for him, right? You're not really going to replace a guy like Williams, right? Like a Hall of Fame level. Trading for Tunsil is about as close as you're going to get to replacing a guy like that, unless you find someone in the draft, which they may still search for, that pass protector in the draft. But as all Commanders fans know, Jaden Daniels, our QB for the next 15 years, right? So if you're really truly expecting him to be your guy for the next however long, you got to protect him. So I don't even care what the haul was for Tunsil. It was necessary. It was needed. If you're Adam Peters and you're going through the list of tackles in the draft, you don't fall in love with any of them so far, you see the opportunity to go get a proven guy like Tunsil, you got to take it. You got to take it. Our offensive line, I would say they played above expectations last season. But in my opinion, a lot of that was Jaden Daniels' ability to scramble, Jaden Daniels' ability to process quickly, made the line look a little bit better than they actually were. I think if you actually give Jaden the time and the protection with a guy like Tunsil, he's going to be even better. So this was a necessary trade. I think this was far bigger than the trade for Debo. We talked a lot about the free agent signings already. I think this was bigger than all those as well. Basically what I'm saying, if you told me we had to lose one of the guys that we signed in free agency in order to keep Tunsil, I'd be perfectly fine with this. This was the biggest move of the offseason and the most important move of the offseason. And hopefully Tunsil is as advertised. I know it was a little shaky in Houston with some injuries, but yeah, we need him to be that anchor on the left side of this line for years to come.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with most of the things you said there. I'd probably grade it out an A-. Y'all know me, right? I hate giving up draft picks for players. I hate giving up draft picks for guys over 30, to be honest. Larry Tunsil, I believe, will be 31 when the season starts. So, but we know, elite tackles can play well into age 35, 36 season. And I do believe that Larry Tunsil, especially from a pass blocking perspective, is an elite offensive tackle in the NFL. It's reminiscent of the move that Adam Peters and the 49ers made when they were kind of first building their longevity that they've had over there, right? First thing they did was make the trade for Trent Williams, right? It really reminds me and echoes that type of move. The question is, like, did we give up too much for 2 years of Laremy Tunsil? Are we going to go right into, getting him re-signed? Yet to be seen. I hope we work on an extension with him, though. The other question I have, I guess not so much a question, but the other reason I think it's a great trade is because of the options it gives you. Last year, we started Brandon Coleman at left tackle. The play was up and down. I thought overall he battled and he showed a lot of potential along that offensive line. And now you can move him into a more natural position, whether it be right tackle, whether it be left guard, whatever you got, whatever the Commanders coaching staff sees him as. And it seems like early reports are saying that he'll likely play right tackle, but that's almost like a double improvement on your line, right? Because you upgrade your left tackle, and now you may have upgraded your right tackle or your left guard position, right? Depending on who they decide should be kicked out of there. And that recent restructure of Andrew Wiley's contract leads me to think that he may be the odd man out when it comes to the starting five on the offensive line. So maybe we see Brandon Coleman go to right tackle. Maybe Andrew Wiley kicks in the right guard while we await Sam Cosmi's health and bounce back from his ACL tear. And maybe Already just stays there at left guard with Biadasz at center. So I think you kind of had a double upgrade by bringing in Laremy Tunsil, especially considering he's replacing a rookie who showed pretty well and showed some potential along the offensive line. So I would grade that overall A-. Y'all know me. I hate giving up picks. I love to build through the draft. And, I think that kind of segues us into our next question. And what will be the main question on today's pod, which is, like, are the Commanders all in? And do some of these, like, recent moves signal us being all in? So, Rome, I'm gonna start with you, man. What do you think? Like, are the Skins all in, or the Commanders? I still call them the Skins. Y'all know me. But are the Commanders all in right now, or do you think this is more of a cautious approach than it may seem outside looking in?
I think it's been a mixture of both. If I had to pick one, I would say they're all in. I would say they're definitely putting more chips to the center of the table than they're keeping, to themselves. But a lot of the signings, you made the point, a lot of them are 1-year deals. A lot of them are saying like the Debo thing, especially to me, reeks of like, hey, let's get this playmaker. Let's try to be an unstoppable offense, score as much as we can, and go get this Super Bowl. The thing is, when you get to the NFC Championship game and you're really one game away, as an organization, as a front office, you have to be all in. You have to start like the window is only open, but for so long, right? Everybody in the NFL knows that. You got your quarterback on a rookie deal. He's playing outstanding. If you don't at least attempt to take a strike right now for this next year, then you're failing your organization, your players, and your fans. So I do think they're all in. But I think Adam Peters has gained a lot of experience with the 49ers. And I think he knows that even if you're all in for the next year or two, you still got to kind of look to that future. So I'm very interested to see what he does with this draft and how he restructures and re-signs some of these players that are only on 1-year deals. Because, again, this offseason could end up, or next offseason could end up looking a lot like this offseason, where we're getting a lot of new faces in the organization.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, I tend to disagree, right? And I think there could be some things that happen over these next few weeks that'll change my perspective on if they're all in or not. But for now, I don't view the Commanders as a team that's gone all in, right? Maybe if they made a crazy splash signing for Milton Williams and gave him that 126 or however many millions he got, maybe I would say, okay, that kind of signifies all in to me. Or maybe if they went in and made a crazy deal for Josh Sweat or, really tried to pry a T. Higgins away from the Bengals or something like that, maybe I would see all in. But when your biggest free agent signing is 3 years, $45 million for Javon Kinlaw, it doesn't look like it's all in to me. It looks like it's more of a cautious approach and more or less hedging your bets, right? To say, hey, we want to do enough so that we're a little bit better than last year, but we're not trying to do so much that we handicap ourselves and handicap our future. And to me, that's the approach I think that Adam Peters is taking. Now, maybe over these next couple of weeks, there'll be a move or two, and we'll talk about this in a sec. Maybe there'll be a move or two that will change my mind on this. But outside a move or two happening, a couple trades or something like that happening, I don't think my mind will get changed on us being all in. One thing that could possibly change my mind is if we get to the draft and the first draft pick that we take, if we make a draft pick at 29, first of all, if we trade down at 29, we're not all in, right? We are building a young core if that's the case. But if we get to 29 on draft day and we see them take an edge rusher, right, and draft solely for need, then I'm going to be like, okay, this is an all-in move, right? Because you're no longer looking at best player available, unless maybe they did think the best player available was that edge rusher. But most likely, if you take an edge rusher at 29, you're saying we are filling a hole at pick 29. And to me, that's what a team that's in win now mode is trying to do. When I think the smart move in the draft is always to go best player available. So we'll see what happens there. But that's kind of my assessment. Now, again, there are some things that could change my mind on this, right? And one of those things would be a big-time move for a guy like a Trey Hendrickson coming from the Bengals. I think Trey Hendrickson is one of those players that everyone's been talking about over these past couple of weeks because the Bengals gave him permission to go seek a trade, and there's really been no movement. And now with the Bengals pretty much committing to Jamar Chase to make him the highest-paid player, non-quarterback in the NFL, with them saying that they're going to lock in T. Higgins, it almost seems like Trey Hendrickson could be the odd man out of this scenario. So, hey, if they make a move for Trey Hendrickson and give up significant draft capital, I will then concede that this team is going all in. But the question then becomes, how much are you willing to give up for a guy like Trey Hendrickson? And that's my question for you, Rome. What do you think should be the asking price, and what would you be willing to part with as a Commander?
All right, I'm gonna be quick on this one because I'm low on battery here, but I do think they should go try to get Trey Hendrickson. But to your point, I don't want them to give up much more draft capital. I'd prefer if they drafted a guy in the first round at 29 or moved up if they felt like they need to. You made a good point, and I agree with the all-in part because I kind of feel that way too. I feel like you even said they're trying to do enough to be a little bit better, but what's a little bit better? Making the Super Bowl? One more game gets you in the Super Bowl. So a little bit better is kind of already being all in. But I do think they need to make another splash move, and it needs to be on that defensive side. I wouldn't be mad if they traded for Trey, but I do kind of feel like we've already given up too much capital in the draft for years to come. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't trade for him. I think they go after an edge rusher in the draft, which I'm sure you and I will touch on here in the next few weeks. Like you said, you're big into the big boards, so we'll be breaking down who is a potential candidate. But I think they're more likely to go the draft route than the trade for Trey. Although, as a fan, trading for Trey is kind of what I want.
Yeah, I feel you there. I don't know, man. I tend to shy away from wanting to trade for Trey Hendrickson just because, I think it's going to take a decent amount of draft capital, right? And I feel like if we
I agree. I don't think they're going to give up a player for him for sure. So that's what makes me not want to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're asking for my second round pick, I don't want to do that this year. We already gave up our 2026 second round to get Tunsil. I damn sure don't want to give up 29 if it's going to take giving up 29 to get Trey Hendrickson. That's not something
we might as well just draft the guy at that point.
Right. And, obviously there's no way you can guarantee a sure thing. And Trey Hendrickson, 17 and a half sacks back-to-back seasons. He's as sure of a thing as it gets at that defensive end position as a pass rusher. But at the same time, I think he also has enough holes in his game that I'm like, this is not a complete player. This was Myles Garrett. Okay, maybe you could convince me to trade the first and second round picks this year to go grab him. But this is Trey Hendrickson, who I think is a great rusher, but is not so great at stopping the run. If I'm trading 29 for a team that's up and coming who needs to continue to build through the draft, in my opinion, it's just not something I'm sold on. And I think that's what it's going to take. From all the reports I've been seeing, the Bengals asking price is crazy. and it basically is because they want a first round pick out of the deal. Not something I'm so much interested in, man. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly cautious though.
Nah. They I prefer that they give up the capital for Tunsil than for Trey. So while it would be nice to have a guaranteed, sure thing as pass rusher, it's not worth the draft capital. And like I said, there's gonna be some guys that you could draft probably down there at 29.
Yeah. Let us know what y'all think in the comments, man. Would y'all go ahead and get rid of pick 29, or maybe even that second round pick, which I think ends up being like 60 or I don't know, 61 or something like that? Like, would y'all give that up for Trey Hendrickson? I don't know. I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that myself. Like, and I could be totally wrong on that, but it just feels like to me that this team has enough holes that we need to keep doing to the draft, especially when you consider that we were the third oldest team in the NFL last season. And we're probably, based off our signings this offseason, probably the oldest. We might be the oldest team in the NFL entering this year, right? I mean, none of our draft picks outside of Kinlaw have been under 30 years old. Our draft picks, none of our free agent signings outside of Kinlaw have been under 30 years old. When I think about it like that, I'm like, maybe I don't want to trade draft capital for anybody over 30. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm leaning with that. And, again, I don't feel like we're in the all-in mode right now, but those are the two things that, to me, one, a trade for a guy like Hendrickson, or two, drafting for need with that first-round pick. Those would signal to me that this team and this front office is going all in for the 2025-2026 season.
Nah, facts. Hey, if I cut out, my phone died, but it's been a solid combo.
Yeah, no doubt. We're definitely going to be back next week, weeks after, leading up to the draft. We're going to try to get on some different guests to break down some folks. Maybe get someone on from the Bengals Nation to break down Trey Hendrickson and what that can mean. I'm also reached out to a couple people within the Patriots Nation to get some more information on Deatrick Wise, Jonathan Jones. I think those are two players that could really help this season, and that we'll look back and we could really point to those two players as being some key signings. But good conversation as always, man. Hail to the culture. We back, Rome.
Hail to the culture, man. We'll see y'all.
Peace.